last year, a film was released that was so bad, so horrifying, so disturbing, that it was removed from theaters after only 2 weeks. The producers realized that they had released an unspeakable evil by creating this film, so they attempted to make everyone forget that it ever existed, and they buried the last remaining copies of the film in these woods. Since then, they have sat here, waiting for someone to speak their name, for someone to remember the evil they had wrought, waiting for someone to utter the incantation that would bring them back to life.
Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgi, and it's finally time for my top 10 worst movies of 2015. That was ominous. Now you might be asking yourself, why on earth are you making a 10 worst films of the year list? Why are you subjecting yourself to that kind of punishment just for this channel? And the answer is, it's not actually for this channel. This is actually an annual tradition of mine. It has been for the last 5 years, where every single January, I go back and look at some of the worst reviewed films of the previous year, and I try and watch as many of them as I can, all within the span of about a week. And you might be thinking, that's insane, and you're right, but there is actually a reason for it. The reason why I do it is because when you engage in as much pop culture as I do, this kind of cleanses the palate, and also gives you a pretty healthy perspective of everything else out there. I can't tell you how often I see on the internet or someone comes into my store and goes, oh, that movie was the worst thing ever. Oh, this book is the worst thing ever. You would be surprised how rarely you actually say that when you actually do set aside time every single year to engage in the actual worst things ever. So yeah, every single year I like to do this. It's kind of my annual equivalent of running a marathon, and often it turns out to be fun, and I tend to be pretty glad that I did it. However, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, and I am not exaggerating this. This was one of the worst years for movies I've seen since I started doing this. This year was brutally punishing on me, so let's have some fun with it.
Now, starting us off at number 10 is kind of an honorable mention, if you can have such a thing on a worst of list. Number 10 is Jupiter's Ascending. Now yes, this movie is indeed bad. It's laughably bad. It's just a collection of crazy, bizarre ideas that are each so wrong in so many ways, combined with a lead actor who's moved way past these types of movies, and a lead actress who really, really doesn't want to be there.
Is there any way to fix it?
But it's not any higher because as bad as this movie is, I couldn't hate it simply because while you watch this, you could tell that the Wachowskis really cared about this. That this was something that they wanted to make for years, and in a weird way, we can all relate to it. We all had that terrible OC that we created when we were 13 and we thought was amazing, but now that we're grown, we realize they were just kind of stupid. Don't lie, every person watching this has a sketch in an old notebook of theirs that has a half-demon, half-angel prince, or a dragon swordsman, or an animal man in a leather jacket with an edgy attitude. We all had those characters that we thought were amazing, but when we grew up, we realized, oh wow, these are kind of awful, and that we should probably hide them away forever. Yeah, this is that, the movie. This is the Wachowskis creating a rollerblading werewolf space knight when they were 12, and then they spent the last 30 years going, no, this is that good, and I'm going to make it into the giant space opera it deserves to be, including the over-eccentric brother sons, the dinosaur soldiers, the psychic bees, all of it. I'm not cutting anything out. This is the dream 13-year-old me had, and by God, I'm going to make it happen. And lo and behold, they did. They got hundreds of millions of dollars to make it happen, and they did it. So kudos to you, Wachowskis, for making the movie that we all wanted to make when we were 12, and proved why none of us should have. At number 9 is Black Hat. Now, Black Hat was pitched as a mature intellectual thriller, so in honor of that, my review will come in the form of a math problem. Hey everybody, what would you get if you took the Bourne films, added them with hackers, then you took out the fun and intrigue of Bourne, and doubled the stupidity of hackers? Well, you'd get a really bad movie. This film is slow, and not in a building tension way, but in a nothing happens way. In fact, it was so slow, I kid you not, I actually had to watch this at double speed in order to get through it quicker, and I didn't lose anything. I still understood it all. That is not a joke, I actually did that. And don't even get me started on how crazy it is for Chris Hemsworth to be cast as an expert hacker. That's right, Thor, talking with such a Sylvester Stallone slur that I could barely understand him.
When he downloaded the PDF, what he downloaded was the keylogger.
Is an expert hacker, which might sound crazy, but don't worry, they'll prove to you that he's a hacker by showing it to you. In all its long, excruciating, real-time, boring-ass execution. What's that? Too boring? Don't worry, because there'll be an explosion or a gunfight coming up right around the corner. Don't know why it's there? Don't worry, the movie doesn't either. At number 8, Terminator Genisys. Now, this one might come as a surprise because while yes, it did indeed get bad reviews and reactions from audiences was mostly, meh, whatever. And I was mostly the same way. Sure, the leads have the chemistry of a brick wall and a coat rack, and yeah, there are times that the special effects are kind of poor to say the least. And I'd be lying if I said that this wasn't a movie that was trying way too hard to reignite the franchise by pulling a Star Trek and just erasing everything in ways that didn't make that much sense. But aside from that, it was okay. It was an okay film. That is, until it ends, when the movie just shuts off without explaining a damn thing. And I don't know why this is, but something about how it just ends without explaining any of the crazy stuff it brought up drove me insane. No, literally, it bugged me so much I actually had to take out my camera and record my post-movie reaction.
The Terminator that went back in time to save Sarah Connor and raised her, and who she views as a father, when they go, "Who sent you back in time?" And he goes, "Those files have been deleted. They wanted to keep their identity secret so that way Skynet would never hunt them down." It's like, alright, that's cool. I get that part. And I said that because I knew at the end of the film they would reveal it. They don't reveal it! There's a massive gaping hole in your logic here. So all I can think is, okay, either Terminator 2 happened and this movie shouldn't exist at all because you stopped all that, or Terminator 3 happened and your ending makes no sense because you're admitting Skynet will still come about one way or another and Judgment Day has to happen. But you need a chart to figure out the timeline that they're doing this, and even then you wouldn't know what's going on because it's the dumbest timeline that they're creating. So either this whole movie means nothing or the ending means nothing. It's, oh god.
That went on for 20 minutes. I'm not kidding you. This movie makes no sense at all, and while the last few Terminator films might not have been great, they at least left the good movies alone, whereas this one went back and shredded them up, then posted all those shredded pieces into a collage and went, "See? Pretty cool, huh?" No, it's not cool. It's a jumbled mess. It's just you taking stuff from the previous films, hoping to hit those nostalgia geeky buttons, and then destroying them in order to create something totally incomprehensible.
You maniacs! You blew it up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
Okay, before I move into the next movie, with that last film, I mentioned that it was just trying to hit nostalgia buttons and it was just aiming itself at that geeky audience and it completely missed. And talking about that, I have to bring up the elephant in the room. For you see, last year there was also another film that came out that was aiming itself at that geeky audience, trying to capture that nostalgia feeling and bring in that old fan base. And it of course was greeted with terrible reviews from both critics and fans, and it completely tanked at the box office. I am of course talking about Pixels. This was on every critic's worst of the year list. They all hated it, they all said it was Adam Sandler's worst film, so you're probably expecting it to be on my list as well, right? Well, here's the thing. When I went in and saw this film, I had already heard all the dumb stuff that was going to be in this movie, so when I saw it, I wasn't really affected by it, especially not the way that all the other critics were. And also, I have to give it some credit. The visuals actually are really good. They're very imaginative and they do work. And is this Adam Sandler's worst movie? Not even close. It's not even in his bottom 5. It's not even the worst one he did this year. So when I think about all that, I had to ask myself, could I really put this movie on my worst of the year list? Yes. Yes, I could. Because it's terrible.
So at number 7, Pixels. Yes, despite the fact that it looked cool and had a good idea behind it, and the fact that I didn't dislike it as much as everyone else, this is still a really bad movie. No matter how good the movie looked, none of that could compete with just the awful dialogue, plot points that made no sense at all, and Adam Sandler just continuing to not care. Seriously, in this movie, his level of not giving a fudge is approaching critical mass, and the worst part is that he's not even the worst part. Josh Gad. Oh, Josh Gad. You're such a talented actor, and yet every second you were on this screen, your character was so flat out horrible that I could feel my opinion of this movie dropping. In fact, if you removed his character completely from this film, it might actually be passable. But probably not, because I can't stress this enough. This makes no damn sense. Seriously, there's a moment where they beat the aliens by entering a cheat code for Pac-Man in for super speed so that they, playing the ghost in real life cars, can go faster. Okay, a few things. 1, there are no Pac-Man cheat codes. 2, if there were, how would you have entered them? The game literally only had a joystick and a start button. 3, how would you have entered that code into the real-life car that wasn't designed to have cheat codes entered into them? And 4, if there were cheat codes for super speed in Pac-Man, why would it make the ghost go faster? That is the kind of stuff that happens all throughout this dumb movie. Man, that one was building up for a while. Okay, on to number 6, Pan. This film wanted to be the darker, realistic reintroduction to Peter Pan, which is a concept nobody was asking for. But even if people had been asking for it, this could have been a great film, but it had nothing working for it. Hugh Jackman as Blackbeard doing his best Johnny Depp impersonation, green screen effects that are some of the most obvious I've seen in modern film, a story that makes no sense. I know I keep saying that about almost all of these films, but seriously, I can't stress enough how ridiculous this one is. This is a movie that has no idea what it wants to be. It stars pirates in Neverland who sing the Ramones and Nirvana, so it almost wants to be a musical, except nobody else sings, so why are they singing? And why modern day punk and grunge songs? And this film tries to be bright and colorful, then it tries to be dark and gruesome, then it tries to be both of those things at the same time. There is literally a moment where the pirates are killing people rather brutally, might I say, and whenever they die, they burst into colorful blasts of paint, and then they show the setting completely covered in this bright colored paint, and it is impossible to watch that scene and think, did they just cover the place in their blood and try and make it fun? And I can't not bring up the most irritating thing in this movie. Captain Hook is a cowboy. A freaking cowboy. And not a good one at that.
But knowing where you're from, that's half of knowing who you are. That's more than most of us here will ever know. At least you know where you come from.
Yeah, that right there, we have to listen to that throughout the whole movie. And yes, it is that irritating. And no, you never get used to it.
Next up at number 5 is Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension. Now, I was planning on reviewing this film and giving you my thoughts on it, but then I realized it would be better if I just showed you guys what this film was like. So, I'm just going to point my camera at my empty living room for the next 5 minutes, and you can just sit there and watch it in real time. Oh my god, even as a joke that's horrible to sit through. Let's just get into the actual review.
Don't ask me why, but I actually kind of was a fan of the Paranormal Activity series, and this one was the final one that was supposed to tie the whole franchise together. So even if almost every film in this franchise was bad, I still probably would have watched it just to see how it ended, and I will give them this. They did indeed tie it all together. They did indeed take stuff from each of the previous films and add it to the big explanation of what the heck is happening, so I have to give them credit for that. The bad news, though, is that the previous films were so all over the place that in order for you to make this story make sense, you had to create the most convoluted, jumbled plot line imaginable. Just a casual reminder to everyone, at the end of the last movie, they literally time traveled using demon powers. How the hell is that going to make sense? Well, they put it in there. Does it help the story or have a reason to be there? No. But they had to put it in there, and by God, they were going to do it. And the way they explained the story is the laziest thing I've seen this year outside of Adam Sandler's acting. In order to understand this movie and understand what is happening to them, the family not only finds the tapes of the previous family, but they also find tapes that were recorded by the cult that was behind all of this, and they stop to explain exactly what's happening. Okay, you know how after these movies you always ask, why did they film all of this? Why didn't they put the camera down? Well, I can suspend my disbelief some, but this is too much. Why the hell would the cult film all of this and then leave the camera where the family can find it so that they know what's going on? It makes no sense. And even though that does tie so many parts of the previous movies together, it still leaves out little tiny chunks that I can't help but look at and go, well then what the heck happened to this? What was the point of that? This film did the impossible by tying up everything and yet somehow leaving more questions. After watching this movie, I have lost whatever little love I still had for this franchise. You know you're a bad film when you not only get yourself on the worst of list, but you also make me want to put all the other movies in your franchise up there. Okay, at number 4, I'm going to cheat here a little bit because I have a 3-way tie. Vacation, Hot Pursuit, and Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. The reason these are all a tie is because I kept trying to decide which one was the worst comedy, and then I realized that no matter which one I put on this list, I would say basically the exact same stuff. Each of these movies are full of gross out humor that isn't funny, it's just gross. Each of them have jokes that are stretched out and go on so long that whatever humor you might have been able to squeak out of them is quickly drained. Each of them is upsettingly predictable, and every single one of them has a character in there that I consider to be one of the worst of the year. I kid you not, this is the order I watched these movies in, and every single one of them topped the last one for worst character of the year. When I saw Hot Pursuit, I said, oh, Sofia Vergara's character is probably the worst character of the year. Then I saw Vacation and said, okay, that little foul-mouthed kid, he's the worst character of the year. And then I ended it with Scout's Guide, and it managed to top both of those because the little, horny, selfie-taking party scout is easily the most unlikable character of the year. I could go on more about each of them, but honestly, I just don't want to because thinking about 3 terrible movies at once is just too much, and it's especially bad when they're comedies, because a bad drama can at least be funny. A bad comedy is just bad.
Next up at number 3 is... That's odd. I remember that there was a film I wanted to put at number 3, but for the life of me, I can't remember what it was. It's almost like this year I saw a movie that was so mind-numbingly bad that in order to protect myself and keep its evil from ever returning, I forced myself to forget it. What could it be? What could have been so sinister and malicious and destructive to its own fan base that it kept me from remembering it? Oh, well, let's find something else to put up there. If I can't remember the actual film that I wanted to put in this spot, then I'm just going to have to break open my In Case of Bad Movie emergency kit and turn to Netflix. Because at number 3, I'm going to put the Netflix original film, that was so bad it was the Adam Sandler film this year worse than Pixels. It was the Adam Sandler film that Netflix paid him to make, and it got such bad reviews that after being up on their front page for only 2 weeks, they immediately snatched it off of there and tried to hide it. The only way you can even still find this on the site is if you search for it by name. This might be one of the worst Adam Sandler films I've ever seen. I'm talking, of course, about The Ridiculous Six.
Now, this movie not only has some of the worst writing and dialogue I've seen in any movie this year, but also some of the worst I've seen in any Adam Sandler film, which is really saying something. But what makes it even more upsetting than any of those other Sandler films is that typically, when Adam doesn't care about the movie, nobody else does. But in this film, everyone is actually trying. Everyone in this movie is really giving it their all, except for Sandler, and that just makes him stand out like a flickering, buzzing light bulb. And as far as the story goes, most Sandler films know what they are. If they're trying to be dramatic, they'll be dramatic. If they're trying to be a comedy, they'll be comedic. This film actually feels like someone had a serious dramatic western written out, then Sandler's team went in and just wrecked it. Because there are so many moments in here where it looks like it's trying to be serious, being shot like someone is trying to be artsy. Then it's immediately followed by something stunningly dumb. For example, spoiler alert, but do you really care? Spoiler alert, this movie ends with Adam Sandler, who is playing a very racist Native American stereotype, leaves his father to die in an abandoned mine while he is screaming for him to come back. Then, smash cuts to Terry Crews playing the piano with his penis. These are literally 2 moments in this film that they put right next to each other. I think that's all you need to know about this movie.
Next up at number 2 is another film that took a geeky property and so badly misinterpreted it that left out everything that made the original work and completely offended the fan base and just deprived it of all fun. What movie am I forgetting? This is going to drive me nuts. I want to say Jewel for some reason. Was there a biopic about singer-songwriter Jewel as she was trying to get her music career going and she was living in her car? No, that wouldn't have been on this list. That would have been delightful. Anyway, I'm talking about Fantastic Four. Yes, at number 2 is Fantastic Four. Now, I already went and saw this in theaters, and when I did a review of it, and then I was still left with so much rage that I did a follow-up video in which I just ranted about it. You can see that one down there. So if you want to see either of those, they're right there. You can go ahead and click on them. And honestly, I don't really have anything else to add to it that I didn't already cover in there. There's nothing else I can say about this movie that sums up how bad it is that I didn't cover in there, except for this. I didn't tell this story when I originally reviewed it because I thought it might have made things a bit too real, but nothing sums up how bad this film is more than this. I haven't smoked in 7 years. I quit about 7 years ago, and I haven't had a craving since then. I cut clean, I haven't had the urge to go back since then, but after I saw this movie, I went to the nearest convenience store to get myself a candy bar because darn it, I earned it after seeing this. I slapped it down on the counter, and I just stared across from the cashier behind them at all the rows and rows of cigarettes, and all I could think was, oh my god, I really need a smoke right now. This movie was so bad, it almost brought me back to smoking. That is not a joke. This film gave me my first craving in 7 years. Kids, I'm begging you, do not smoke and do not see this movie. Both of those are equally damaging to your psyche and physical being. And you know what the worst part is? It's still just number 2. There's another film that came out this year that was even more destructive and just mind-rotting and physically painful to sit through. And that movie is... how can it be anything other than this? It's 50 Shades of Grey.
This is at the top of almost every worst movies list I've seen this year. So I thought, well, my expectations are super low, so I doubt I'll put it up there too. And yet, here we are. It's my number 1 as well. Remember how I said I heard about everything that happens in Pixels, and because of that, when I saw it, it wasn't all that bad? Well, I knew from critics everything that was going to happen in this movie as well, and yet it was still just as bad. I could have heard a dozen critics talk about a scene, then when it got to that in the movie, I was still stunned to see it unfold. There is nothing that can prepare you for how terrible this film is. And as bad as Fantastic Four was, its damage is only localized to the film and the fan base itself. This movie actually hurts the real world because this movie actually romanticizes an abusive relationship. It convinces women that this psychotic relationship is something to strive for, and I'm not talking about the BDSM stuff. You want to do that, that's fine. Although I will say, this is not BDSM. This is flat out abuse. Controlling, mentally scarring abuse. I don't care that this was a Twilight fanfic written on somebody's BlackBerry with all the spelling errors left in. Even beyond that, this is still such a destructive film. This is a movie that tried to be romantic, and I kid you not, the main love interest scared the hell out of me. In fact, stop the music. This is not the appropriate music to have while talking about this movie. There you go. That's the only way this character should be portrayed. They gave audiences Patrick Bateman from American Psycho and Norman Bates from Psycho, which I wonder if there's a connection between those two. I just realized that. But anyway, it gave audiences those two characters wrapped into one and then told them that he was a dreamboat and people bought it up. There is a moment where our heroine says that she is going to go and visit her mother in Georgia, and her love interest, Christian Grey, violently freaks out because she didn't tell him. She then leaves for Georgia, and he just shows up. Not at her mother's house, but at a random restaurant they're at. You have to stalk someone through a telescope or with satellites to pull something off that crazy. And yet it's romantic because he takes her on a plane ride after that. And that's not even the most disturbing moment of the movie. I cannot stress to you enough that what I'm about to say is absolutely true. I love horror films, but for some reason the whole slasher horror film never really hit me. I never really felt fear for guys like Michael Myers or guys just carrying around a giant knife, people like that. But as I watched this movie, I got that fear in me. This movie ends, again, spoiler alerts, but again, you should not be watching this movie. But this movie ends with our protagonist getting upset with Grey, so she storms out and he follows after her, and she turns and says, "Stop," and he keeps coming, and in that moment, I forgot that this was supposed to be a romance. I forgot they had sequels plans, and I just thought, oh my god, he's going to kill her. This movie is so bad that it is a love story they put out on Valentine's Day, and yet I still thought the love interest was going to murder the protagonist, and as bad as that is, as big of a screw up as that was, I've still only covered about a third of how terrible this film is. You cannot screw up a movie this badly, be that destructive to our culture, and be anything but the worst movie of the year.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We did it. You should all be very happy with yourselves. You sat through the 10 worst movies of 2015. And now that we have finally buried that monster, we can finally look forward to all the great movies that are coming out in 2016. I already did a video talking about my 10 most anticipated movies coming out this year, and I'm looking forward to all of them. They all make me feel so good just to think about, because there are some real gems in there. Oh my god, I forgot about Jim. Oh god, how could I forget? Jim and the Holograms came out last year. That movie was so bad and just so insulting to the fan base, I completely forgot it. This film disrespected all those loyal fans in a way that I have never seen in any movie. And it just contained some of the most bland and yet at the same time crazy, ridiculous, stupid storylines that I could imagine. It somehow crammed bland and dumb together into one. There is no way that I can properly send off this film and talk about all the things it did wrong in just one simple top 10 list. I'm going to have to battle this film in a review next week on the Professor Thorgi channel. Come back then and pray that I'm still here.